Hey, Sam.
Hi,
Morning,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. Hi, Rabbi.
Hello.
What?
Rabbi
Hey,
time.
David. Hey.
Oh, morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Rabbi Nachan Nash is on this week on Wednesday, right?
That is correct. Bezrat Hashem Barach Shemo. Okay, in our list of the various offerings that are part of the series of positive commandments, again, out of the 613, there are 248 positive commandments. And so for most of these sacrifices, there's been just the general sacrifice, even though the sacrifice itself has many details. It counts as one. There are just a few types of offerings, as he mentioned before. There's an elevation offering, also called the whole burnt offering, also called the olah. And then there is a peace offering or a whole offering, that's the shlamim. When it comes to the elevation offering, so when we say the whole thing is burnt, we don't mean the animal in its entirety. The skin is removed, the animal is butchered, and then the various pieces are put on the altar. The blood is sprinkled before that, and then it is skinned and butchered, and the various elements are brought up onto the altar. For the peace offering, the same thing, although some of the details as to where they're slaughtered and are a little bit different. But the animal is first slaughtered, the blood's collected, sprinkled on the altar, and then the animal is skinned and butchered. Parts of the animal are burnt on the altar, parts are given to the Kohanim, and parts are taken by the family that brought the offering. Then there's a sin offering, and we said that the sin offering is brought in a case where it was a serious transgression, which a kares level penalty, but it was done inadvertently. Either the person forgot that this particular thing was forbidden, or they forgot, let's say it was Shabbos, they forgot it was Shabbos. So under those circumstances, you would bring a sin offering. And the sin offering also, it was slaughtered, the blood is sprinkled on the altar, blood is collected, brought and sprinkled on the altar. The animal is skinned, part of the animal is burnt on the altar, and part of it is eaten by the Kohanim in the courtyard. Then we had what we called an asham talui. An asham talui was you weren't sure if you're supposed to bring the sin offering. So the classic case is that there were two pieces of meat. One of them had forbidden fat on it. One of them did not. The person doesn't know which one they ate because they were both consumed, and now you don't know which one this person ate. So just to sort of cover his bases, he can bring this conditional guilt offering for such a case, because he would have brought a sin offering if he knew for a fact that he had eaten the forbidden stuff. So he can bring what's called a conditional guilt offering. And now we have the actual guilt offering. So that's 71. And that is that he commanded us that one who does certain sins must offer a guilt offering sacrifice. This is what's called a definite guilt offering. And the sins for which one is liable for this sacrifice are misappropriation. So misappropriation means that you misused something that belongs to the Beit HaMikdash. We might call it a kind of embezzlement. And again, this is accidental. I think we're going to say it's accidental. It's called me'ila. And so let's say you took something that belonged to the Beit HaMikdash for your own use. You took money from the Beit HaMikdash for your own use. You used something that belongs to the Beit HaMikdash in such a way that you weren't supposed to use it. So that's called me'ila. With me'ila, you pay back the principle of what was taken. You add a fifth, and you also bring an offering, this Asham offering. You would also do it for theft. We talked about that, where the person stole and then denied that they stole, and then admitted that they stole. In such a case, you would bring an offering, this Asham offering. One who has sexual intercourse with a designated maidservant. This is a very unusual case that's mentioned in the Torah. She's called a shivcha charufa, or shivcha shenechrefes leish. So the scenario is that somebody had a Gentile maidservant who is in the process of being freed. Once she's freed, she's going to be a Jew. She is betrothed to somebody, but again, she's in some kind of in-between status, and she's betrothed to another Jew, and then somebody else is intimate with her. So this is a very rare case, which is discussed in the Torah. And also one who swears falsely with an oath over a deposit. So let's say somebody left something with you to watch. They were going on a vacation and they left their Triumph Spitfire with you to watch. And is that a car, the Triumph Spitfire? The Triumph is a car. Is the Triumph Spitfire a car? Let's assume it is. So they left their car with you to watch. You're doing it as a favor to them. It's in your driveway. And one day you decide that you are just going to take it for a spin. You're not supposed to. That wasn't the condition. The condition for watching over this was simply that you're going to watch over it. You're not supposed to use it, but you couldn't help yourself and you take it out for a spin. Then it goes back into your parking lot, into your driveway. At some later time, somebody steals the car. When somebody steals the car, you are not liable for the theft because you're doing this guy a favor to watch it. So you're not liable for the theft, except if you had misused it and then it was stolen. And you did, because you weren't supposed to be driving it at all and you drove it. So what happens is nobody knows it, or you think nobody knows it, that you took it out for a spin. So when it comes time to go to court about this, the judges are going to ask you just to take an oath that you didn't misuse it. As long as you didn't misuse it, then you're not liable for what happened to the car. So you take the oath that you did not misuse it, that you did not touch it. Now, later on, you feel guilty, and you admit that, in fact, you had used it. So this would be another one of those cases where you'd bring a guilt offering. And this is one who misappropriated an error and derived benefit worth a pruta from sanctified property, whether sanctified for temple upkeep or whether sanctified for the altar. So when it comes to the misappropriation, as I was pretty sure of this, and now he is saying it overtly, this is, you did it it was accidental misappropriation of funds from the Beit HaMikdash, and it had to be something that was valued at least a pruta. So for instance, let's say you used the electricity, let's say you plugged your laptop into the electricity of the Beit HaMikdash and you had not gotten previous permission to do so. That also could be misappropriation of temple funds. Let's say it works out that it's less than the value of a pruta, which is a few cents. So you would not technically be liable. It still would be wrong, but you wouldn't have to bring an offering. But if it was worth even more than just a few pennies, then now you are fully responsible for me'ilah, and that involves, maybe not, doesn't seem like a big deal to return the principal and the extra fifth, but now you have to bring this offering. Or also one who had robbed the value of a pruta or more from his fellow and took an oath saying that you didn't. One who had sexual intercourse with a designated maidservant, whether inadvertent or volitional. In these cases, he's obliged to offer a sacrifice for his sin, and it is not a sin offering sacrifice, it's a guilt offering. It's called a definite guilt offering, an Osham Vadai, and he, God, said regarding misappropriation, and he sinned in error, etc., and he should bring a guilt offering. He also said with theft, he said he denied his countrymen and swore falsely, etc. He brings a guilt offering. And it says, and she is designated maidservant for a man, he shall bring his guilt offering. And the regulations of this, so that was that sort of narrow case of the maidservant. And the regulations of this commandment have already been explained in Tractate Kritot. Again, that's the tractate that deals with that punishment, karet, which might mean that a person dies young, might be that they die without children, might be their children die young, might be, but in most cases is understood to have an impact on the world to come, that they would not have a place in the world to come. Okay, that is mitzvah 71. Now we have mitzvah 72, another kind of offering. That is that we're talking about God, also commanded us to bring a variable burnt sacrifice for certain specific sins. Now, when it says variable, what it means is that a wealthy person will bring one kind of offering, an animal. Somebody who is down lower on the scale of wealth might just bring a bird offering, and one who's on the lowest scale, part of the scale, might just bring flour, F-L-O-U-R. And the sins for which one is liable for this sacrifice are impurification of the temple and its sanctified objects, which means you use them in a state of impurity. Either you were in impurity or they were impure. You're not allowed to be impure and use these sanctified objects, and you're not allowed to use them when they themselves are impure. An oath of speech, an oath of testimony. This means that you spoke in a forbidden way, or you lied in testimony. And that is one who is impure from one of the primary sources of impurity, as we set out in the introduction to the order of impurities. So primary means that you came in contact with the dead, you touched one of the forbidden shrotzim, a person was in contact with semen or sperm, or a woman was a nida, or I think that's pretty much it. As we said on the introduction of purities, commentary on the Mishnah, and entered the temple. So either you walked into the Beis HaMikdash in that state, and into the courtyard, the upper courtyard, or you ate a korban, even truma, I believe, is going to be included in this, in that condition. that is the impurification of the temple and its consecrated objects, or that he swore falsely with an oath of speech that he inadvertently transgressed, or he swore falsely with an oath of testimony, whether inadvertently or volitionally. So there's certain things that you're not allowed to say because it's like considered a false oath. So if you swear in God's name that something is true just in course of conversation and it's not true, that could be swearing falsely with an oath of speech. And then if you do it in court, that's a separate, a slightly separate violation, but they are both violations that require an offering. Behold, for any of these actions, he must, and it says in these cases, it's inadvertent or volitional. We saw before with sin offerings that they are only if it was inadvertent. We saw before, even with the Osham, the guilt offering, in the case of Me'ilah, for instance, it's inadvertent. In the misappropriation, it's inadvertent. But here, with the oaths, it's inadvertent or vertent. Behold, for any of these actions, he must bring a sacrifice that is called the variable burnt offering. And that is his saying, and if a person sin and hear the voice of adjuration, or when a person touches an unclean thing and it be hid from him, and he comes to know of it and be guilty, or if a person swears speaking with his lips, and it shall be, when he shall be guilty, that he shall bring his guilt offering. But if his means do not suffice, then we're going to see that it could go down in level. So again, if you would bring an animal offering if you can afford it. If you can't, then you bring bird offerings. And if you can't afford that, you bring a meal offering or flour offering. And for this reason, it's called a variable burnt offering, because it doesn't remain one type, but rather he could bring this type or another type. Everything according to what the means of the sinner is obligated to offer the sacrifice would suffice. So you see here, this is not like sometimes it's misunderstood, and there are people who think that this is the case with all offerings. That with all offerings, if the person has means, he brings an animal. If he doesn't, he brings birds. If not, he brings a flour offering. But that's not the case. It's only in these circumstances. In the other circumstances, whether you have the means or not, you have to bring an animal, if it's supposed to be an animal. And the regulations of this commandment have already been explained in Tractate Kritot again and in Shvuot. Because why in Shvuot? Because that's the one that deals with oaths. Shik Parsha Vayikra, Mishnah Torah, offerings of an intentional transgression. Okay, now we have confession. And that is that he commanded us to confess the transgression and sins that we have done before God, and to say them together with our repentance. And that is confession. Now, this is pointed out by almost every scholar who talks about repentance, that the Rambam counts confession as the positive commandment, not repentance. Obviously, there's repentance. The confession is part of repentance, but he doesn't have a separate mitzvah for repentance, for what we call tshuva. When he counts a mitzvah, he counts confession. And that is that he commanded us to confess the transgressions and sins that we have done before God, what we call vidui, and to say them together with our repentance. And that is confession. And its intent is that one say, please, Lord, I have sinned, I have transgressed, I have rebelled, I have done such and such. So you would acknowledge that you have transgressed, and then you would list specifically what you did. And he should prolong the statement and request forgiveness about this matter according to the polish of his speech. In other words, you that you should try to the best of your ability to express this sincerely and specifically. If you're eloquent, it should be eloquent. And you should know that even the sins for which one is liable for the types of sacrifice that are mentioned, that he said that one of them offered to atone for him, do not suffice with the sacrifice without its confession. So if you bring a sin offering, there also needs to be a confession. And that is a saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, a man or woman who commits any of these sins of man, and they shall confess the sins that they did. So this is an absolutely essential part of the tshuva process. Even sacrifices are not going to work if there's not a confession with them. So you have to say in words, not just think this, you actually have to express it, that you are and sorry, and you have to express it specifically as much as possible. Even the al-chaitz that we do on Yom Kippur, where we are, sort of generally talking about sins, a person's encouraged, if they can, to specify. Obviously, you don't shout it out in front of the whole community, but for their own kind of quiet confession, to specify a particular sin if they remember doing that sin. And the language of the Mechilta is, since it is stated, and he shall confess that which he has sinned upon it is to be upon the sin offering when it is in existence, not after it has been slaughtered. So you would say the vidui first, before the animal is slaughtered, and then the animal is slaughtered. It is only understood that an individual confesses for entering the temple, where this verse appears in Parashat Vayikra about one who renders the temple that sanctifies the object impure, and that we mentioned it as we explained it. And so the Mechilta there raises the possibility that we would only learn the obligation for confession from Scripture about one who renders the temple impure. There is the only place where it actually mentions confession together with a sin, with a sacrifice. So it at first sense thinks, well, maybe you only need to confess when you're bringing a sacrifice about that particular sin. From where are you to include all the other commandments? Hence we learn to say, speak to the children of Israel and they shall confess. And from where do we know even sins that bring punishments of excision and death penalties at the court? It states the sins to include negative commandments that they did, to include positive commandments. And there it says, from any of the sins of man, for theft, for robbery, for evil speech, to commit a trespass, to include one who swears falsely, and a blasphemer, and be guilty, to include all those guilty of death penalties. So every kind of a person brings a offering for every kind of sin, even ones that involve the death penalty, even ones that have sacrifices. Every one of them, before he has the death penalty, he should confess. Before he gets lashes, he should confess. Before he brings a sacrifice, he should confess. And even on those ones that don't require any of those, a person should confess that this is a necessary part of any kind of tshuva. This confession is between man and God so far. This is not talking about between man and his fellow. This is just between man and God so far. But tshuva always requires a confession. It might be even those who are killed according to the testimony of colluding ones. I only said in the man be guilty. That means to say that he's not obliged to confess when he knows that he had not sinned, but rather what was testified against him was false. So the one exception is if somebody testified against him and it was a false testimony and he wasn't really guilty. If a person is not guilty, then he doesn't have to confess. Now, why would you think that you might have to confess? So I once brought this up with David and Lois. We were once talking about this. There is a notion that if a person is found guilty in a lower court, that it's like, in a certain sense, what the courts rule down here, the court above rules. You might think that since the court found you guilty, the court in heaven also considers you guilty. And even though you know you didn't do it, but the facts are that the court found you guilty, and maybe therefore you might think that you have to do tshuva, even for something you didn't do. So the Rambam here is saying you do not have to. That means to say he's not obligated to confess when he knows that he's not sinned, but rather that what was testified against him was false. So you don't have to confess, and I'm assuming he means also you don't have to do tshuva. Again, it sounds weird that you would, but there's a kind of reasoning that you might think leads you to this. That sin, even though you know you didn't do it, but since the court found you guilty, in a certain sense, heaven finds you guilty. You might think that. Behold, it's made clear to you that we are obligated to confess for all types of transgressions, big and small, and even for positive commandments. But because this command, that is, and they shall confess, appeared with an obligation for a sacrifice, it could have entered our mind that the confession is not a commandment by itself, but is rather from those things that are an extension of sacrifice. That's why it needed to clarify this in the Mechilta with the language. I might have thought when they bring their sacrifices, they confess. When they don't bring sacrifices, they don't confess. Hence, we learn to say, speak to the children of Israel, and they should confess. But still, the understanding of confession is only, you might think, maybe only in the land of Israel. How do we know that it's also in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora? Hence, we learn to say their iniquities and the iniquities of their fathers. And likewise, in Daniel, it said, to you, Lord, is justice, etc. Behold, that which we have mentioned has been made clear to you, that confession is a separate obligation. It is an obligation for the sinner for every sin that he did, whether in the land or outside the land, whether he brought a sacrifice or didn't bring a sacrifice. He's obliged to confess, as it is stated, and they shall confess for their iniquities. And the language of the Sifra is, again, halachic midrash, and he shall confess. That is confession of words. And the regulations of this commandment have already been explained in Tractate Yuma, see Parshas Naso. So I think we're going to take a day or two to talk about this mitzvah of confession. It's a very fundamental, a very important mitzvah. And there are some sort of interesting permutations of this mitzvah. But again, just to so far to point out that the Rambam identifies confession as one of the 613 mitzvahs, what we call vidui. And interestingly, he does not call tshuva one of the mitzvahs. Tshuva is not one of the mitzvahs. You could say that repentance happens in the heart, and maybe that's why vidui happens in the mouth. But we've seen that there are certain other mitzvahs that happen in the heart, as it were, that the Rambam does count as mitzvahs, like the mitzvah to be in awe of God, the mitzvah to cleave to God, the mitzvah to love God. These are mitzvahs that are in the heart, and he still counts them as mitzvahs. So it'd just be sort of interesting to explore that and to talk about some of the nuance of the mitzvah of vidui. I am going to end early today. I'm sorry. I have a funeral that I need to go to. And so I'm going to leave just a few minutes early. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to learn with you, Lois and David, Sam and Estelle. And I look forward to learning with you guys tomorrow. Be well, guys.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.